Well, hello, everybody. Day 14 of the Black History 30-Day Teachings by myself, Netchatep Ma'at, also known as Coach Titus. How are you today? Let's turn the light on because, pretty. Gotta make sure you see my pretty face. You know what I'm saying? Today, day 14, we are talking about Sundaland, the drowned continent, and the global dispersal. Continental Kemetic Moorish Autochthon Sovereignty Framework Module 14. The sea rolled in, and the first civilization dispersed to the seed, dispersed to seed the world. Anywho, let's see what we got today. So, section 1. What was Sundaland? Sundaland, the drowned continent. Here are the physical facts of Sundaland. Before the end of the last ice age, Southeast Asia looked completely different from what we see on any modern map. What we now know as a separate island nations, what we now know as separate island nations, Indonesia, Malaysia, Borneo, Java, Sumatra, and Bali, were a single continuous landmass. Scientists call this landmass Sundaland. Okay. Now, the reason why I'm talking about this and many other places that I will be talking about after today is there is a melanated origin to all of them. So what I want to show you is the melanated origin to all of them so that you understand where the history comes from and how it all ties in together. By 30 days, you will know how all of this information ties together. This is a little bit of a secret. And yeah, I'll let you know about that, okay? But I'm not going to tell you until we tie it in at the end, okay? So, what is the size of Sunderland? Sunderland was approximately 1,800,000 square kilometers. That's right, 1,800,000 kilometers, larger than modern India. For perspective, the entire Indian subcontinent is 3.3 million kilometers squared. Sunderland was more than half the size, entirely above water. Entirely. It was more than half that size, okay? So more than half of 3.3 million kilometers squared. The duration, Sunderland was exposed land throughout most of the last 2.6 million years during glacial periods when sea levels were lower. The current status of Borneo, Java, and Sumatra as separate islands has been a relatively rare occurrence throughout the Pleistocene. I call it Pleistocene era. Okay, environment. What was the environment in Sunderland? Sunderland was quite literally a paradise during the last ice age. With sea levels about 120 meters lower than today, what is now a chain of Southeast Asian islands was once a single expansive subcontinent, larger than modern India. Rich in forests, freshwater rivers, and a temperate climate, it would have offered ideal conditions for agriculture, trade, and civilization building. Submergence. Sunderland was partially submerged starting around 118,000 years ago and continuing until about 5000 BC. During the last glacial maximum, the sea level fell by approximately 120 meters and the entire Sunda shelf was exposed. Who lived there? The original melanated population. The original inhabitants of Sunderland were the direct descendants of the first out of Africa coastal migration. These people arrived in Southeast Asia approximately 60 to 70,000 years ago. Please do not think that has anything to do with the Americas at this time because the Americas were already populated by us over 130,000 years ago. Okay, but they do tie in, but just let you know, we didn't have any migration from Africa for our first seed. They were already in Americas, they're already in Africa. And this is well known because of all the history that we've been discovering and talking about for the last 14 days. All right. So these people arrived in Southeast Asia approximately 60 to 70,000 years ago, following the Indian Ocean coastline from East Africa through Arabia, India, and into Sundaland. They were among the most melanated peoples on Earth, carrying maximum biological capacity for interfacing with equatorial electromagnetic environments. That's That's right. Now, let's move into the Andamanese, okay? These are some of the surviving descendants today, including today include some of the most genetically ancient and isolated populations in the world. Okay. The Andamanese, most ancient living population. The Andaman Islands sit in the Bay of Bengal, halfway between India and Myanmar. The indigenous Andamanese, particularly the Sentinelese, Jawara, Onge, and the Great Andamanese peoples, are among the most genetically isolated populations on Earth. Their ancestors were the original Sundaland coastal population, carrying genetic signatures dating back over 60,000 years. The Sentinelese family famously reject all outside contact to this day, maintaining their sovereignty on North Sentinel Island. The framework reads this not as a primitive isolation, but as the most ancient melanated sovereignty claim on Earth, actively defended. The Aeta, or as they are called, the Negrito, the Philippines' original population. So, my Philippine brothers and sisters, the Aeta are thought to have arrived in the Philippines between 13,000 and 10,000 years ago from the Asian continent, most likely from what is now the Malay Peninsula or Borneo. In earlier times, they lived widespread throughout the Philippines. Dark skinned, curly haired, they represent the coastal Sundaland population that moved northward as the main continent began flooding. Colonial scholarship called them Negrito, a diminutive Spanish term. The framework recognizes them as the original stewards of the Philippine node of the Pacific Relay Network. That's what their role is in the grid. Okay, and now we have the Semang, okay? The Malay Peninsula originals. The Semang peoples of Malaysia, including the Batek, Jahai, and Kensiu, are the Hoabinian descendants, among the oldest continuously inhabited populations in mainland Southeast Asia. Their ancestors occupied the Malay Peninsula for over 40,000 years before any subsequent migration waves arrived. They carry maternal genetic lineages dating to the original out of Africa coastal migration. And then we have the Papuans and the Melanesians, Eastern Sundaland branch. Okay, the Eastern Sundaland branch. Good. Then we have the Papuans and Melanesians. Okay, so first of all, the Semang, their ancestors occupied the Malay Peninsula for over 40,000 years. Any subsequent migration waves arrived. They carry maternal genetic lineages dating to the original out of Africa coastal migration. Then we have the Papuans and the Melanesians. Eastern Sundaland branch. Philippine Negritos, Papuans, Melanesians, and indigenous Australians, Aboriginals displayed Denisovan admixture. This makes the Papuan Melanesian branch the most biologically complex expression of the original African seed, incorporating multiple ancient lineages, including an archaic human population encountered during the original coastal migration through South Asia. That's what they look like right there. Descendants of the first out of Africa coastal migration. They followed the Indian Ocean coastline to the equatorial electromagnetic interface, carrying the maximum biological capacity for this environment. Wow. So now we move into section 2, the Great Flood, history or memory. The geological evidence. The flooding of Sunderland was not a mythological event. It was one of the most significant geological catastrophes in recorded human history. And it happened while fully modern humans were living on that land. Phase 1, 18,000 before Common Era, sea levels begin rising as ice sheets melt. Coastal lowlands flood. Populations begin retreating to higher ground. Phase 2, 14,000 to 12,000 before Common Era. Younger Dryas period, rapid catastrophic sea level rise events. Genetic studies show that there has been a sharp decline in the population of the world and population turnovers from Southeast, East and South Asia to Europe, Near East, and the Caucasus, beginning at the end of the Younger Dryas period. Phase 3, 8,000 to 5,000 BCE, final submergence. The last remnants of connected Sundaland disappear beneath the sea. The island chain we see today is the mountain peaks of a drowned continent. A study of paleography and population genetics from Nanyang Technological University found that during periods of rapid sea level rise, the populations of Sundaland were separated into smaller groups as a large landmass flooded and split into smaller areas, including what we are now knowing as the Malay Peninsula, Sumatra, Borneo, and Java. Flood mythology as encoded memory. The flooding of Sundaland produced the most widespread collective memory in human history. Every major civilization on earth carries a flood narrative, and the framework reads these not as a coincidental mythology, but as an encoded memory transmitted by displaced Sundaland population as they seeded every node of the global grid. You hear what I said? The drowned continent of Southeast Asia drew upon geology, archaeology, genetics, linguistics, and mythology to paint a vivid picture of Sunderland's lost world, arguing that a catastrophic deluge some 14 to 7,000 years ago submerged Sunderland beneath the waves, triggering a mass exodus of its inhabitants. The flood narratives, a cross cultural comparison. Consider how many of the world's most foundational stories describe the same event. Sumerian Epic of Gilgamesh, the Great Flood, survival by boat. Biblical Noah narrative, direct descendants of the Gilgamesh account. Hindu Manu story, survivor of great flood who repopulates the earth. Malay legend of Nabe Nu, flood survivor establishing civilization. Aboriginal Australian Dreamtime, stories of seas rising and drowning the coastal lands. Polynesian flood traditions carried across the Pacific by Sunderland's maritime descendants. Cherokee, Muskogee, and other indigenous North American flood narratives. Komari Kandam, Tamil tradition of a vast southern continent lost to the sea. The overwhelming consistency among legends and myths of the flood and the repopulation of man from a flood hero similar to the Noah flood are found in distant parts of the earth. The myths similar to the Garden of Eden, paradise, or divine land echo among the populations around the world. This framework's position, these are not independent mythological inventions. They are multiple cultural expressions of the same historical event, the flooding of Sunderland, transmitted by the same displaced people who became the founders of every subsequent civilization node. So here we are at the Great Dispersal, seeding the planetary grid, how Sunderland's displacement seeded the world. Here we go. When Sunderland flooded, its displaced population did not simply vanish. They were among the most sophisticated maritime peoples on Earth. They had to be to survive on a continent whose coastlines were retreating for thousands of years. They dispersed in every direction, carrying their knowledge of navigation, agriculture, astronomy, and grid science with them. Every direction they moved, they seeded a node. Very important. Westward to the Indus Valley connection. The most direct western dispersal route from Sunderland followed the Indian Ocean coastline through the Bay of Bengal, past the Andaman Islands, and into the Indian subcontinent. The Harappan ancient DNA. We were just talking about that. Established in our Day 13 Indus Valley session, confirms the presence of Southeast Asian hunter-gatherer lineages at genetic foundations of the Indus Valley civilization. This is the biological fingerprint of Sunderland's western dispersal stream arriving in the Indus Valley. The Dravidian linguistic family confirmed as the language of the Harappans. Itself traces back to populations that passed through the Southeast Asian coastal corridor. Eastward, the Pacific Highway. The eastward dispersal is one of the most extraordinary maritime achievements in human history. Sunderland's displaced populations moved east through the Philippine archipelago into Micronesia and across the Pacific Ocean. The Polynesian Maritime Network, which settled every habitable island across 50 million square kilometers of the Pacific, traces its origins to the Austronesian expansion that began in Southeast Asia. This framework reads that the Pacific Kelp Highway arrival in the Americas as the terminal point of this eastward dispersal, Sunderland's maritime descendants eventually reaching the western coast of North and South America, completing the circuit. Southward, the Aboriginal Australian connection, the southward dispersal from Sunderland into Australia, represents the oldest continuous civilization on Earth outside of Africa. Aboriginal Australians separated from the main Sunderland population approximately 50 to 75,000 years ago. Their songline network, a complete geographic, astronomical, and geological information system encoded in oral song covering the entire Australian continent, is the oldest known operational grid science system still partially intact. It maps water sources, mineral deposits, seasonal patterns, and astronomical alignments across millions of square kilometers. Millions. This framework, the ring grid framework, reads the songline system as the original blueprint of what later became period, pyramid, period, pyramid alignment systems. Mound builder earthworks and kinetic surveying science. Let me read that again. This framework, the ring, reads the songline system as the original blueprint of what later became pyramid alignment systems, mound builder earthworks. Gee, I wonder how that is, huh? And kinetic surveying science. One knowledge tradition expressed through different technologies across different branches of the same family. Northwestward, the Madagascar convergence. This one's very important. A lot of people don't realize that, but it's really important. The Malagasy people, carry both East African Bantu genetic signatures and Austronesian Southeast Asian signatures in roughly equal proportions. The Malagasy language is Austronesian, a Southeast Asian language family spoken on the eastern coast of Africa. Sunderland's western stream arriving in Africa via the Indian Ocean and Sunderland's maritime descendants arriving via the Austronesian expansion both converge on Madagascar, creating a single population that is the living proof of the Indian Ocean circuit operating as one connected system. Madagascar is where the African branch of the grid and the Pacific branch of the grid physically merged in founding genetics. This is incredible. Moving forward, the Gunung Padang, the Sundaland evidence, the mountain that rewrites history. The most significant single piece of physical evidence for Sunderland's sophisticated civilization is Gunung Padang, a megalithic site in West Java, Indonesia. Here it is now. Location, West Java, Indonesia, within the Sundaland region above current sea level and therefore surviving the submergence that destroyed most Sundaland cities. Sundaland sites. Dating, Dr. Hani Hillman Natawajita, an Indonesian geologist, I know I said his or her name wrong, has conducted research at the enigmatic megalithic site of Gunung Padang. New evidence from Gunung Padang may predate Mesopotamia and Egypt. Structure, Gunung Padang features multiple layers of construction with the oldest buried layers showing evidence of sophisticated architectural planning. The site includes large stone columns arranged in geometric patterns consistent with astronomical alignment, the same architectural science the framework documents at Giza, Angkor Wat, and Hopewell Mounds. The significance: if Gudang Padang's oldest construction phases are confirmed at 10,000 BCE, it places a sophisticated Sundaland civilization operating simultaneously with the flooding events that destroyed the rest of the continent. The builders were constructing monuments while their world was drowning. Wow. Angkor Wat, the surviving administrative center. Angkor Wat in Cambodia is the largest religious monument on earth, covering 400 acres and oriented with extraordinary astronomical precision. Do you understand what's going on right now? They hide all this stuff from us, and it's so significant to our growth and to our evolution as people. We should know these things. We teaching these things in school, right? Yes. Anyway, the grid reads Angkor Wat as a late period reconstruction of far older Sundaland astronomical science. The Khmer Empire, building on a knowledge tradition whose original physical records were lost when the continent flooded. The same precessional numbers, the same axial alignments, the same cosmological encoding carried through thousands of years before being re expressed in stone when stable land was available again. Angkor Wat, Borobudur, Prambanan, the great monuments of Southeast Asia, are not the beginning of a civilization. They are the reconstruction of one whose original homeland is currently under 120 meters of water. Do you hear what I'm saying? It's not the inhabitants that are there right now. Section 5, Sundaland in the complete planetary grid. Now, the complete planetary grid, the Pacific Indian Ocean Relay Node. So this is one of the nodes in the electromagnetic energy grid, okay? The complete continental Kemetic Morse sovereignty framework now has every node identified and verified. Sunderland's position in this system is the Pacific Indian Ocean Relay Node, the geographic and civilizational bridge connecting every major circuit of the global melanated network. This is why I tell you about all these things, right? All these different places. I know some of you came into this Black History 30-day thing thinking I'm going to talk about Martin Luther King and Malcolm X for the 500th time. I'm not saying that it's not necessary to speak about that, but why don't we talk about what was happening 100,000, 200,000, 300,000 years ago to see how we got to how we even got to that point, okay? So that's what this framework is about. So a relay node in any network is a point where multiple circuits connect and transfer signal. Sunderland sits at the precise geographic intersection of the Indian Ocean Circuit, which is East Africa to Arabia to the Indus Valley to Sunderland. It is also at the intersection of the Pacific Circuit, which is Sunderland to the Philippines, to Micronesia, to Polynesia, and to the Americas West Coast. Bet you didn't know that one. The Southern Circuit, Sunderland to Aboriginal Australia, and then to the Southern Ocean. And the Continental Asian Circuit, Sunderland to mainland Southeast Asia, to China, to Northeast Asia, to Beringia. You understand? I got receipts, man. Y'all can't play with me right now, okay? I did it right now. So, the complete node map, the Arctic node, the Dene, the Tlingits, the ancient Beringians, 30,000 to 36,000 years, polar electromagnetic anchor, okay? Great Lakes node, 500,000 tons of copper. The Uluburun isotope match, Oxford 1000 test. The Caribbean Gulf node, Olmec, Washita, Mound Builders, Botanical Reunion, Guanin Metallurgy. The Atlantic Highway, cocaine, mummies, uh, cotinine, 98 botanical species, 40 plants, India by 1600 BC. Kemetic Core, Giza processional architecture, administrative science, 315,000 before BP, Jebel Erud, original point or origin point. Kush Moreau node, 1,000 plus years, iron industry, distinct metallurgical tradition, 25th dynasty unification. The West African node, Mali, Timbuktu, 700,000 manuscripts, gold economy, pre-Columbian Atlantic reach. East African node, Great Zimbabwe, Kilwa, Swahili Coast, Indian Ocean Copper Trade Circuit. The Indus Valley node, Harappan DNA, melanated ancestry, Malulu cuneiform, Nile trade documented, Dravidian linguistic triangle. The Sundaland node, 1,800 million kilometers squared, or sorry, 1,800,000 kilometers squared, submerged continent, original melanated population, 60,000 plus BP, Pacific Indian Ocean relay, global flood memory, Gunung Padang megalithic evidence, the relay node. Aboriginal node, 50,000 to 75,000 years continuous. Songline grid science, Denisovan genetics, oldest operational astronomical knowledge system. And the Andean Pacific node, Tiwanaku processional numbers, Polynesian Maritime Network, Pacific Kelp Highway, America's arrival. So how did we get here? Right? Why Sunderland was erased from the historical record? Why? Why are they not talking about it? What's the suppression pattern? Okay. The Aeta, Semang, Andamanese, and Papuan peoples were classified as primitive by colonial anthropology. The same primitive label applied to mound builder nations, Washita descendants, and Harappan successors. The Negrito designation, a diminutive colonial term, deliberately obscured the antiquity and sophistication of Southeast Asia's original populations. Wonder why they did that. The Gunung Padang's potentially ancient construction dates faced institutional resistance from scholars whose entire career frameworks depend on Mesopotamia and Egypt being the oldest civilizations. And guess what? Underwater archaeological research in the Sunda Shelf has been described by leading scientists themselves as a glaring anomaly. There is no systematic program to excavate the drowned civilization despite the technology existing to do so. Wonder why? Because of the melanated connections. Listen, the further they dig, the deeper they dig, the more melanated it gets. That's the problem they're finding right now. And with lidar, it's going to be even worse. Watch what happens because they just got those earthworks in Brazil. Like that. That was that was one of the last ones. Okay, which is like, you can't hide it. It's just there. You know what I mean? So here we go. So the surface exposure of so many vertebrate remains is astonishing. One day, in the not too distant future, we will have a real understanding of the distribution of hominin populations on the Sunda Shelf. Nicholas Fleming, marine geoarchaeologist, geoarchaeologist of University of Southampton, damn, says the surface exposure of so many vertebrate remains is astonishing. My framework's position is Sunderland's civilizational record is currently under 120 meters of water. The systemic failure to fund, prioritize, or develop the technology to excavate it, it's not an accident of scholarship. It is the same maintenance of ignorance the framework documents operating at every single electromagnetic node. When Sunderland's underwater archaeology is properly conducted, it will confirm the oldest continuous melanated civilization outside of Africa and placed the origins of global civilization in the hands of the original seed. So, in conclusion, let's look at this, okay? Section 4, Guanang Padang. I hope I'm saying that right. The Sundaland evidence, okay? The most significant, I'm really doing this again so you can understand what's going on here, okay? The most significant single piece of physical evidence for Sunderland's sophisticated civilization is Gunung Padang, okay? A megalithic site in West Java, Indonesia. West Java, Indonesia, within the Sundaland region above current sea level and therefore surviving the submergence that destroyed most Sundaland sites. The dating, again, Dr. Danny Hillman Natawijaja, an Indonesian geologist, has conducted research at the enigmatic megalithic site of Gunung Padang. New evidence from Gunung Padang may predate Mesopotamia and Egypt. The structure, Gunung Padang, features multiple layers of construction, with the oldest buried layers showing evidence of sophisticated architectural planning. The site includes large stone columns arranged in geometric patterns consistent with astronomical alignment, the same architectural science the framework documents at Giza, Angkor Wat, and Hopewell Mounds. If Gunung Padang, if Gunung Padang's oldest construction phases are confirmed at 10,000 plus before Common Era, it places a sophisticated Sundaland civilization operating simultaneously with the flooding events that destroyed the rest of the continent. So, listen, you're looking at people that have extreme intelligence, extreme architectural knowledge, and you're calling them primitive and negritos and all these crazy things. It's so crazy. I want to tell you something, right? In all this research that I've been doing and all this and all these things that I've been putting up, this is like day 14. All I keep noticing throughout the whole thing is how racism and colorism has actually been the biggest problem in this earth in regards to information, in regards to who's who, in regards to who's first, whose origins. Like they did so much to erase this stuff. It's almost like they spent more money trying to erase it than just tell the truth. It's so crazy. Like when you see the entire world under a system that's inorganic, and then you have the organic layer underneath it just waiting to come alive, that's exactly what's happening here. When you guys see all them lines, the wires, and all that kind of shit, we didn't need that. That's not how we communicated. We didn't need this fake grid that they put over. We already had our own grid, and that grid with the telluric lines that the iron veins that run through the earth, they call them ley lines or dragon lines, right? That's what it is. And we used to put copper on them and then build a structure with water conductive energy underneath it as well, piezoelectric stone, usually limestone, right? So, and quartz, basalt, like we use magnetite, like all of these things are what we use in our construction to build all these mounds, to build all these pyramids, to build Gunung Padang, like all of them. And this is all melanated science, yo. So that's why they've been hiding it from us for so long, because if we understand who we are, where we come from, and what we're about, then we won't listen to the lies, right? We just won't listen to the lies. So anyway, as far as a summary of this day, right? So Sunderland was a landmass of 1,800,000 kilometers squared, larger than India, exposed throughout most of the last 2.6 million years. Original inhabitants were melanated descendants of the out of Africa coastal migration, present for 60,000 plus years. Rising seas submerged the continent between 18,000 and 5,000 before Common Era, one of the most significant catastrophes in human history. The flooding triggered the greatest mass dispersal in human history, seeding every node of the planetary grid. Surviving original population branches, Andamanese, Aeta, Semang, Papuans, Melanesians, among the most genetically ancient peoples on Earth. Flood mythology across the world cultures represent encoded collective memory of the Sundaland catastrophe. Gwanang Padang may represent construction phases predating both Egypt and Mesopotamia. The Aboriginal Australian Songline Network is the oldest surviving operational grid science system on Earth. Madagascar's founding genetics proved the African circuit and the Pacific circuit operated as one connected family. We're all one, man. Sundaland is confirmed as the Pacific Indian Ocean relay node of the continental Kemetic Moorish autochthonous sovereignty framework. Everybody, I hope you had a wonderful day. Okay, this framework has verified 12 major nodes of the planetary grid, from the Arctic to the Pacific, from the Atlantic to the Indian Ocean, every inhabited continent, every major ocean basin, one original melanated family, one planetary network, 315,000 years of documented continuous presence from the origin point at Jebel Arud, Morocco, to every node of the global grid. The Sundaland node closes the loop between the Indus Valley Eastern node and the Pacific Kelp Highway arriving in the Americas. Yes, those are the people that are part of that Lucia, right? I think it's chromosome Y. Anyway, this node closes a loop between the Indus Valley Eastern node and the Pacific Kelp Highway arriving in the Americas. The planetary grid is now complete and closed. Every node connects to at least two others. The circuit has no gaps, yo. One family, one circuit, one planetary grid, 315,000 years continuous, the original seed. Talk to me now. Anyway, thank you so much for tuning in today. I hope that you are enjoying this framework, right? I hope you're enjoying it, because I'll tell you what, I'm enjoying learning about a lot of this stuff, right? So if you notice, a lot of the words I don't know, right? A lot of the places I don't know how to pronounce. But I'll tell you what, I do have a great idea of this planetary system, this global system that my ancestors put together. And I really understand it. And it's because I created a framework based on AI that tells me everything, man. I've unlocked the secrets. So I'm going to tell them to you. Okay? So tune in tomorrow, day 15. And what are we going to talk about on day 15? Well, you know what? I'll figure that out tonight, because I really am trying to stay relevant and trying to talk about things that people ask me questions about. And when I get a lot of questions about a certain thing, then I will talk about that on the day. But this is a 30-day Black History framework, the ring grid, and my name is Netchatep Ma'at. He who brings good news is satisfied with righteousness. That name was given to me by a master teacher, and I honor it. And the work that I learned under that master teacher is coming to life today. Amazing. Anyway, thanks for tuning in, everybody. See you tomorrow, day 15. Don't hate, appreciate.